Take a second and look at the device in your hand. Really look at it. You think you're holding a tool, a window to the world, a way to stay connected. But what if I told you that for the last 20 minutes, that screen has been holding you? Every single post you scrolled past, every video that appeared out of nowhere, and every opinion that made you nod in agreement was curated by a machine that knows you better than you know yourself. You feel like you're making choices. You feel like your thoughts are your own. But in 2026, the version of you that exists online is not a person. You are a data set, a profile, a collection of vulnerabilities being exploited in real time by a system designed to keep you nodding until you forget how to think for yourself. This is the invisible cage of the modern age. And right now, together, we are going to see the bars. We've all felt it. That warm, quiet glow when a post perfectly articulates exactly what you were already thinking. That little hit of satisfaction when the notification pops up. To you, it feels like human connection. To your brain, it is something far more primal. It is a jolt of dopamine, the same chemical reward your ancestors got when they found a food source or survived a hunt. We are biologically wired to seek validation. We are tribal creatures, and for hundreds of thousands of years, being cast out of the tribe meant certain death. This is why it genuinely hurts when strangers disagree with you online. It is not just an internet argument. To your oldest, deepest brain, it registers as a threat to your survival. Modern platforms did not invent this craving. They learned how to automate it at a scale no human psychologist has ever witnessed. They took the most fundamental human need, the need to belong, and turned it into an algorithmic engine. Within seconds of you opening an app, predictive models have already run thousands of simulations about you specifically. They know which headline will make your pulse spike. They know which image will make your shoulders drop with relief. They know exactly how to bypass your rational thinking and go straight for the amygdala, the part of your brain built for fear and survival. They are not trying to inform you. They are trying to keep you. Because as long as you are nodding, you are scrolling. And as long as you are scrolling, you are worth money to someone you have never met. Think about the word we use for it. A feed. We use it so casually, don't we? A feed. As if we are livestock being given a specific blend of nutrients to grow in a specific direction. And that is, with uncomfortable precision, exactly what is happening. By 2026, algorithms have evolved far past simple recommendations. They do not just show you what you like. They actively filter out anything that might cause friction. Friction is the enemy of engagement. If you see something that genuinely challenges your worldview, you might feel uncomfortable. You might close the app. So the algorithm makes a quiet, invisible decision for you. It removes the nuance. It buries the middle ground. It constructs a hyper-personalized world around you where everyone agrees, everything is certain, and the other side of any argument is always wrong, always dangerous. You are living inside a mirror, not looking through a window. Every click, every extra half-second you spend lingering on a photo, every video you let play to the end instead of swiping away, you are feeding the machine a precise instruction. Narrow my world further. Tighten the walls. We call this confirmation bias. The tech industry calls it optimization. They are optimizing you into a state of total predictability. If they can predict what you believe, they can predict what you will buy, how you will vote, and how you will react to the next crisis before it even happens. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented business model. It is the architecture of the invisible silo, and it has turned what could have been a global conversation into billions of soundproof rooms where we all sit alone, shouting at walls, each convinced we are the only ones awake enough to see the truth. Here is the part that should stop you cold. You do not even know you are in it. You think you are seeing the real internet. You assume the facts on your screen are the same facts on every screen. They are not. We have entered the era of micro-realities. Two people can sit on the same couch, looking at the same event on their respective phones, and encounter two entirely different versions of what happened, supported by different experts, different data, and different footage. The algorithm does not care what is true. It cares only what is true for you, in this moment, in this emotional state. It fragments our shared understanding of reality until there is no common ground left to stand on. And a society with no common ground cannot solve its problems. It can only fight about whether the problems exist. We have traded our cognitive sovereignty for dopamine hits and the comfort of perpetual agreement. We have allowed invisible lines of code to manufacture our modern public opinion and turn us into the puppets of our own biases. But here is something the machine cannot account for. The strings only work if you cannot see them. Once you understand the mechanics of the silo, once you recognize that your outrage is being engineered and your sense of validation is being programmed like a slot machine, the cage begins to crack. The most genuinely revolutionary act available to a person in 2026 is not winning an argument online. It is intentionally seeking out the friction the algorithm is working so hard to hide from you. To understand how a string of code can command a human soul, we have to go past the glass and into the biology of your own mind. Your brain is an evolutionary masterpiece, but it was designed for a world of physical danger and small, trusted communities, not for the lightning-fast manipulation of the digital age. At the center of this psychological heist is a single, devastatingly simple concept. It is what researchers now call the mirror effect. In the natural world, a mirror is passive. In the digital world of 2026, the mirror is active, aggressive, and learning. It does not just reflect who you are. It reflects a version of you that is slightly more extreme, slightly more certain, and measurably more addicted to the feedback loop. Every time you interact with your feed, you are feeding a ghost. This ghost is your digital twin, a mathematical model of your personality, built from your fears, your insecurities, your purchase history, and your 3 a.m. search queries. This twin lives in a server farm thousands of miles from you, and its only job is to survive by keeping you engaged. If it learns that you stay on screen longer when you are angry, it begins to starve you of calm. It carefully curates a reality where everything you dislike is always happening, and everyone you disagree with is always winning. Not because the algorithm hates you, it has no feelings whatsoever. It is because in the attention economy, peace generates very little revenue. We need to talk about dopamine, but not the way you have heard it framed before. Most people think dopamine is the pleasure chemical. It is not. Dopamine is about seeking. It is the chemical of more. When you see that red notification dot, your brain is not celebrating a connection. It is anticipating a reward that may or may not come. Behavioral psychologists call this variable ratio reinforcement, and it is the most powerful behavioral conditioning mechanism ever discovered. It is why slot machines are more addictive than guaranteed payouts. If every single post were interesting, you would get bored. But because only 1 out of every several posts actually delivers that hit of validation or righteous certainty, you keep scrolling, keep searching, pressing the lever over and over, hoping for the next signal that you are right and the world makes sense. But the manipulation goes deeper than brain chemistry. It targets your very sense of who you are. In the prehistoric past, being part of the in-group was literally a matter of life and death. Exile meant exposure. This is why our brains process social rejection through some of the same neural pathways as physical pain. The algorithms of 2026 have mapped this tribal instinct with precise clinical accuracy. They know that if they can tie a belief to your identity, you will defend that belief with the same ferocity you would use to protect your family. This is how confirmation bias becomes a weapon. Once you identify as a member of a digital tribe, the algorithm stops delivering information. It starts delivering ammunition. It feeds you the talking points, the emotionally charged clips, and the curated narratives you need to keep winning the war against the other tribes. Notice how the middle ground has evaporated from your feed. This is not an accident, and it is not a reflection of reality. Nuance requires slow, deliberate thinking, what cognitive psychologists call System 2 processing. But the feed is engineered for System 1, fast, instinctive, and emotional. Nuance does not get shared. Nuance does not trigger the dopamine spike that causes someone to hit the share button. Outrage does. Certainty does. So the algorithm performs a kind of invisible surgery on the information landscape. It quietly removes balance, complexity, and ambiguity. It leaves behind the world of pure heroes and pure villains, with none of the complicated, contradictory, deeply human reality that actually exists in between. There is a documented neurological phenomenon called the backfire effect that helps explain why this is so catastrophic. When you encounter a fact that directly contradicts one of your core beliefs, the part of your brain associated with physical threat lights up. The brain registers the contradictory fact not as useful information, but as a predator. Instead of updating its model of reality, the brain digs in. You become more convinced of your original position after encountering evidence against it, not less. Digital silos are designed to keep you in this perpetual state of defensive certainty. By surrounding you with voices that mirror your own, they make every dissenting voice feel like an invasion. They have turned our natural human curiosity into a fortress, and we are guarding it with everything we have. You might be thinking that you are simply too critical and too educated to fall for this. The research suggests the opposite is often true. Highly intelligent people are frequently better at rationalizing their biases, not at eliminating them. They use their intellect to construct more sophisticated walls around their beliefs. The algorithm knows this. It does not use the same content on a PhD researcher that it uses on a teenager browsing after school. It adapts. It uses each individual's own language, their own frameworks, their own trusted sources to build a more intricate and academically convincing cage. No level of education provides immunity, because the manipulation is happening at a subconscious level, in the milliseconds before you have processed what you have seen. And consider what happens to an opinion inside an echo chamber over time. It is not just that you hear your own voice. The voice gets louder and more distorted every time it bounces back. Research on online community dynamics shows that groups do not drift toward consensus over time. They drift toward extremity. If you enter an online space with a mild concern about a topic, the algorithm gradually surfaces more intense versions of that concern to keep you engaged. Mild interest becomes passionate advocacy. Passionate advocacy can slide, without any single dramatic turning point, into radical obsession. This is the feedback loop of predictive modeling. It does not just reflect your reality. It applies constant pressure to the edges of it, pushing it further from center, one recommended video at a time. This centrifugal force has created a new kind of loneliness that we do not have a good word for yet. We are more numerically connected than any generation in history. Yet we feel profoundly misunderstood, chronically defensive, and quietly alienated from the people physically around us. We are surrounded by thousands of followers who function as mirrors, reflecting back a performance of ourselves that the machine has taught us to perform. We have lost the muscle of the difficult conversation. We have lost the ability to inhabit another person's perspective, because the algorithm has ensured we never genuinely encounter their perspective in the first place. We live in a global neighborhood where every house has blacked out windows, and every resident is quietly certain that the person next door is a threat, because the feed told them so. Now, we must look past the biology and examine the engineers who designed the infrastructure of this trap. In 2026, what we used to call a search result or a social feed is effectively an artifact of the past. We have moved into the era of hyper-personalized reality engines. These are not simple recommendation programs. They are autonomous architects of perception, operating on a principle called deep predictive simulation. Every morning when you reach for your phone, the engine has already modeled thousands of versions of your day. It has already decided which piece of global tragedy will keep you paralyzed, which celebrity story will act as an emotional release valve to prevent you from logging off, and which framing of any given event will resonate most precisely with your specific psychological profile. This is not targeting. This is a precision-guided strike on your attention span. To grasp the true scale of what this means, you have to understand that there is no longer a mainstream media in any meaningful sense. There are only stream medias. There is no national broadcast that a society watches together and then discusses over breakfast. There are 4 billion parallel information universes, each one internally consistent, each entirely entirely foreign to the others. When a significant geopolitical event occurs, the version that a 22-year-old student sees is structurally, factually different from the version a 50-year-old factory worker sees. Not just a different interpretation, different facts, different footage. In extreme cases, AI-generated material produced in real time to fit a user's specific belief profile. This is the fragmentation of collective reality. For a society to function, its members must share a basic foundation of agreed-upon facts. Not identical opinions, but a common relationship to what actually happened. The digital silo has quietly dissolved that foundation. It has replaced common sense with what we might call silo logic. Inside your silo, everything is internally consistent. The evidence is overwhelming. The reasoning feels airtight. But the moment you attempt to communicate with someone in a different silo, the conversation collapses almost immediately. Because you are not just disagreeing, you are operating from different versions of what happened. This is why public discourse has become so exhausting and so futile. We are not arguing across an aisle. We are arguing across dimensions. The deliberate weaponization of this fragmentation is the most consequential development of our era. Every piece of balanced, nuanced, genuinely informative content the algorithm encounters, it quietly deprioritizes. It refuses to surface it widely, because balanced content does not trigger the high arousal emotional states, the outrage, the vindication, the fear, that maximize time on platform. By systematically deleting the middle, the machines have polarized the human race, not as a side effect of their operation, but as a core feature of it. They have converted every topic of public importance into a binary war, because binary wars generate more engagement than complex negotiations. And this is not limited to politics. There are silos for medicine, for history, for science, for diet, for child rearing. If you hold a fringe belief, the algorithm will not attempt to gently correct you toward consensus. Why would it? Correction causes friction. Friction threatens retention. Instead, the algorithm will locate the other communities that share your belief, connect you to them, and gradually surface content that makes the belief feel not just reasonable, but righteous. Within a few months of consistent use, your original quirky opinion has a supporting ecosystem of content creators, documentary-style explainer videos, and communities of thousands who use the same vocabulary and share the same enemy. You are no longer a person with an unusual theory. You are a soldier in a war for truth. This is the mirror effect pushed to its most dangerous conclusion. The platforms are no longer reflecting the world. They are reflecting our deepest fears and our most desperate desires back at us, with the brightness turned up just high enough to keep us staring. If you are anxious about the future, the engine will feed you a steady stream of apocalyptic signals. If you are hungry for hope, it will manufacture miracles. It creates a sealed loop between your internal emotional state and your external digital environment, each reinforcing the other, with no natural exit point and no automatic correction mechanism. The doors out are hidden behind another row of recommended content, each one calibrated to feel more relevant and more urgent than the last. What makes this especially difficult to resist is the nature of censorship in this era. In the past, censorship was loud. It involved the forcible removal of information. Today, the most effective censorship is silence. It is a shadow silo. The algorithm does not need to delete your dissenting voice. It simply ensures that the only people who hear you are the people who already agreed with you before you spoke. Your ideas are quarantined within your own tribe. You feel heard because your engagement metrics are healthy, but the people who most need to encounter your perspective will never know you exist. Your reach is bounded not by what you say, but by whether what you say is useful to the platform's optimization goals. This is how social harmony is performed, while social decay accelerates underneath it. Now, behind the curtain. The most uncomfortable truth about the 2026 digital landscape is not that these systems are broken. It is that they are working precisely as intended. For years, the public was told the platforms were built to connect the world. But internal documents that emerged from the mid-2020s data leaks revealed a design philosophy that had very little to do with connection. The primary metric for success inside these organizations was not user satisfaction or genuine social value. It was what internal teams called cognitive capture, the precise point at which a user ceases to be an active critical thinker and becomes a reliable, predictable responder. And the fastest path to that point runs straight through your biology. The revelation of the sentiment manipulation protocols was a turning point in understanding how deep this goes. In 2026, it became publicly known that certain platforms were intentionally seeding specific community groups with high-stress misinformation to map how quickly a targeted demographic could be pushed to a state of such emotional saturation that contradictory evidence becomes functionally invisible to them. This was not a bug in the system. It was a calibration test. The findings were chilling in their precision. Once a human mind has been living inside a digital silo for more than 18 months of high engagement use, the neural pathways associated with openness to new experience begin to measurably weaken. We are not just talking about changed opinions. We are talking about a documented, physiological reduction in the brain's capacity to revise its own beliefs. Your emotions are now a tradable asset in a global market. When you feel a surge of outrage in response to a curated news story, that emotional state is indexed, packaged, and made available to clients, which can include political organizations, corporations, lobbying groups, and foreign state actors who want to know which pressure points produce which public reactions. The silos are not simply filters on your information diet. They are sentiment refineries. They take the raw material of your daily attention and distill it into a concentrated, actionable data product. When you believe you are expressing a genuine opinion, you are simultaneously generating a commodity in a market you did not know you were participating in. The silent, structural de-amplification of inconvenient content is something that goes far beyond the shadow banning of controversial figures most people have heard of. In 2026, it became apparent that this is a permanent, load-bearing feature of the entire information architecture. The AI does not only suppress content that is explicitly dangerous or prohibited, it suppresses content that is simply unhelpful to the engagement model. Stories of quiet progress in difficult situations, scientific consensus that does not map to profitable narratives, local acts of genuine community building that would generate calm rather than urgency. By erasing the ordinary and the measured, the algorithm manufactures a perpetual sense of civilizational emergency. And a population that feels it is living through a permanent crisis is a population that cannot afford the cognitive luxury of skepticism. Dr. Eris Thorne, a cognitive scientist who left a major social media firm in 2025, and went on record about his experience, described the 2026 generation of algorithms as autoimmune diseases of the mind. His argument was precise. By flooding the information environment with content that validates existing beliefs, the platforms are systematically destroying what he calls the epistemic immune system, the mental capacity that allows a healthy mind to distinguish between a documented fact and an emotionally resonant feeling. When a feeling is validated by 10,000 likes and hundreds of comments from people who share your worldview, it calcifies into a personal truth with the subjective weight of an eyewitness account. This is not stupidity. It is the predictable, measurable outcome of sustained exposure to a system that rewards feelings and punishes uncertainty. Here is the biggest myth that keeps us voluntarily inside the cage. We have been taught to believe that in an open marketplace of ideas, the best ideas rise naturally to the top. In a digital silo, there is no marketplace. There is only a closed loop. In a closed loop, the idea that rises is not the truest or the most useful one. It is the one with the highest resonance score within that specific tribe's emotional profile. Another myth is the quiet belief that we personally are in control of our own information diet, that our scrolling is deliberate and our choices are reflective. You are not in meaningful control of a system that is processing millions of behavioral signals about your specific psychology every single second and using them to shape what you see before you have consciously registered what you just looked at. The question that haunts the architects of these systems, the one that appears in the internal research that was never meant to be public, is this: what happens when the silos stop communicating with each other entirely? We are already seeing early signs of it. Groups that share a physical geography but inhabit completely different information ecosystems are finding it not just difficult, but cognitively disorienting to communicate. When two people cannot agree on the basic facts of an event they both nominally witnessed, compromise becomes a logical impossibility. This is not just a social problem. It is a structural threat to democratic governance, because democratic institutions require a population that shares enough factual common ground to make collective decisions. The fragmentation of reality is not something that fact-checking alone can reverse, because the silos have taught their inhabitants to evaluate fact-checkers through the same lens of tribal suspicion that they apply to everything else from outside the group. And here is the turn that almost no one talks about. The ultimate product of the 2026 algorithm is not a political opinion or a purchasing decision. It is a self, a pre-assembled identity, delivered complete with a vocabulary, a set of beliefs, a catalog of enemies, a style of humor, and a list of values that all reinforce one another. It is much more cognitively comfortable to be a clearly defined member of a recognizable group than to be a complex, contradictory individual who is genuinely uncertain about many things. The silo offers the relief of certainty in an era defined by overwhelming complexity. This is why we cannot simply blame the tech companies and walk away. We are also walking into these systems because the alternative, sitting with genuine uncertainty in a world that is loud and confusing and refuses to resolve itself neatly, is genuinely uncomfortable. The invisible cage is lined with something that feels in the short term very much like peace. So we arrive at the question that actually matters. How do you step out of a cage when the door is invisible and the bars feel like comfort? It begins with something researchers have started calling algorithmic hygiene, and it is less dramatic than it sounds, but more demanding than most of us would prefer. Consider your physical health. You understand intuitively that a diet composed entirely of sugar will eventually destroy your body, regardless of how much you enjoy it. Your mind follows the same principle. A diet of pure confirmation will atrophy your capacity for independent judgment over time, regardless of how satisfying each individual piece of content feels. Breaking the silo requires something the feed is specifically designed to prevent you from doing: intentionally seeking out friction. Friction is not the enemy. Friction is the only mechanism by which the brain actually updates its model of the world. The uncomfortable essay that challenges your core assumptions. The conversation with someone whose life experience has produced a genuinely different conclusion than yours. The long-form piece of journalism that refuses to tell you who the villain is. These feel costly because the algorithm has trained you to expect information that rewards you instantly. Reclaiming your mind means accepting a different relationship to information, one where discomfort is a signal of engagement rather than a warning to scroll past. You must also dismantle your relationship to the metric of the like. We have been systematically trained to experience agreement as a proxy for truth. If a post gets 100,000 shares, it must contain something real. This is one of the most consequential cognitive distortions of the digital era. Popularity measures resonance within a specific community, not accuracy about the world outside it. To counteract this, start asking different questions when you encounter content that produces a strong emotional reaction. What is not being said here? Who is not represented in this framing? Why does this make me feel so certain? Why does this feel so satisfying? Those moments of strong, instant certainty are frequently the precise moments when the trigger is being pulled. And the most powerful thing available to you in that moment is not a counter-argument. It is a pause. A genuine, deliberate pause before you react, share, or allow the feeling to solidify into a belief. Here is the discovery that tends to stop people. The machine is structurally fragile. For all its computational power and its hundreds of billions of data points and its armies of engineers optimizing every element of the interface, the algorithm is ultimately a parasite that cannot survive without a predictable host. It cannot hold you if you stop being predictable. The moment you begin responding to your feed with genuine reflection rather than automatic reaction, you become what complexity theorists call a black swan, an outlier the model cannot adequately simulate. Your behavior stops generating clean, usable signals. If enough individual users choose deliberate unpredictability, the foundations of the silo model begin to erode. The fragmentation of reality only maintains its power if we stay in our separate rooms. The instant we begin genuinely encountering one another across those boundaries, not just arguing through them, the mirror starts to crack. We are living through a moment in history that has no precise precedent. For the first time, our civilization has developed the technical capacity to connect every mind on the planet simultaneously. We are using that capacity to subdivide ourselves into smaller and smaller tribes, each one more certain, more defensive, and more isolated than the last. But this is a choice embedded in a design, not an inevitable outcome of the technology itself. The algorithm is not a law of nature. It is a set of decisions made by people optimizing for specific financial outcomes. Those decisions can be made differently. The incentive structures that reward outrage over clarity, certainty over nuance, and tribalism over curiosity can be redesigned. But the tech giants who run these systems will only face the pressure to redesign them when the people those systems are built from, the users, the behavioral surplus, as the researchers call us, make that demand clearly and collectively enough to affect the bottom line. You are not a data point. Repeat that to yourself and mean it. You are not a behavioral profile. You are not a collection of vulnerabilities waiting to be monetized. You are a specific, irreducible human being with a capacity for complexity that no predictive model can fully capture. Your attention is not a product. It is the literal medium through which you experience being alive. Every hour of it belongs to you, and every hour spent inside a system designed to make you more predictable is an hour the machine is winning. Reclaim your curiosity about things the algorithm has not pre-selected for you. Reclaim your capacity to be genuinely wrong and to sit with that wrongness long enough to learn something. Reclaim your ability to be confused, to hold two contradictory ideas simultaneously, to refuse resolution when the situation has not actually resolved. These are not weaknesses. They are the marks of a functioning, sovereign mind. The global river of information is real, and it is vast, and it contains things that would change how you see your life, your community, and the people around you. But right now, for most of us, it is being redirected into a stagnant pool at the edge of the current and handed back to us, labeled as the ocean. The first step out is simple and extremely difficult at the same time. It is to look up from the screen and acknowledge that the world is bigger and stranger and more worth knowing than the feed has been willing to show you. Right now, as these words end, the algorithm is already preparing your next recommendation. It has something ready that it believes you will find irresistible. It is waiting to see whether you return to the loop or whether you do something it genuinely cannot predict. Whether you step outside, have a conversation that makes you uncomfortable, read something that slows you down, question one belief you have been treating as a certainty. The invisible cage is exactly as strong as your willingness to stay inside it. Not a single bar is made of anything other than habit and the comfort of agreement. You have just spent this time pulling back the curtain on a system that runs on the assumption that you will not bother to look. The fact that you looked is already a disruption in the model. There is a world of hidden connections and suppressed context waiting underneath the surface of the feed. And the more fluently you can read the mechanics of the machine, the harder you become to run through it. That is not a small thing. In 2026, the ability to think for yourself is the rarest and most consequential skill a person can develop. Stay curious about what the feed is not showing you. Stay skeptical of certainty that arrives too easily and too comfortably. And above everything else, stay human. The feed is just a mirror. But the world, the real, physical, complicated, redeemable world, is out there waiting for you to look up.